Hello, and welcome to the Shared Practices Podcast, Season 1, Episode 7. I'm your host, Dr. Richard Lowe, and in this part of the season, we're talking about associateships and how to find good ones, avoid bad ones, and also how to expand the scope of your practice, which procedures to learn, how to learn them, which CE courses to take. We've got with us today Dr. Shawn Vyver. Something awesome that Shawn has done is created a dental podcast website called practiceinapod.com, where you can search for dental podcasts by topic or by speaker. We talk about it briefly here at the beginning of the show, but I don't think we mentioned the title of the website enough. So it's practiceinapod.com, and I'll have that in the show notes, which we're trying something new because I've gotten feedback that some people can't click the links in the show's description on iTunes if you're on your computer listening. So we're going to shift all the show notes from now on to our website, sharedpractices.com. So the notes and the links in this episode will be at sharedpractices.com/1-7 for episode 7 of season 1. So sharedpractices.com/1-7. Okay, and here is our interview with Dr. Shawn Vyver. The other thing that you've done that's amazing is you've created this Practice in a Pod website, which for me, I'm trying to create a kind of systematic topic by topic podcast on business practices. And I use your website like every day. Like yesterday, I was like, okay, I looked up everything that Jason Wood had done and listened to those 3 episodes before I went and interviewed him. And it made the interview that much better because I knew where I could take the conversation, and I can look up a topic and it'll hit on that topic. So thank you for creating that website. And for anyone who doesn't know, it's basically a dental podcast directory that's searchable and organized, and it's amazing. So thank you for doing that.
Well, thanks for looking at it. You know, I built the website just for that reason, because I wanted to look up stuff myself.
Right.
And podcasts are. It seems like it's pretty hard to do that through iTunes because you don't get what you want to look for. So that's exactly why I built it. So I'm glad you're using it.
No, we're enjoying it. So thank you. So
Good.
Some of your associateships early on, and not being the greatest, I think
They were horrible.
Just to put it nicely. No,
Yeah.
I think a lot of new dentists are afraid of ending up in a situation like that and go through some crap before they find something that's actually good. So do you mind talking about what your experiences were and what happened there?
Sure. You know, I don't think dental practices are anything different than just relationships with people. And the practices that I started out in, I thought I was being kind of upfront and honest with people, and I felt that they weren't being upfront and honest with me in return. And
Okay.
that created some big problems. So just like in life, just like in any long-term relationship, if you aren't upfront with what you want out of the relationship, then it's going to end badly. No matter, or it's going to be it's going to be a struggle the whole way. So,
Right. Well, so how many associateships did you end up kind of going through?
5, I think.
Okay.
I mean, some of them were so fast, I don't even remember them. But I will tell you, my first job, out of dental school.
Straight out of dental school. Okay.
Straight out of dental school, zero real world experience. I knew enough to know that I didn't know how to practice dentistry.
Okay.
I mean, I knew enough to know that I couldn't run my own practice right out the gate, and I knew what my deficiencies were. So, dental school doesn't give you a whole lot of experience.
No.
In any one area.
It gives you the minimum usually.
Yeah, the minimum, the bare minimum. So I said, well, I want to, I'm not totally comfortable with endo. My surgery's okay. Things like that.
Right.
So going into it, I said, I do not want to be the only dentist here at this very large corporate chain practice.
Uh-huh.
Medicaid, capitation, all the, the whole 9. And I said from the very beginning, I don't want to be the only dentist here. I want to have a mentor dentist who I can learn from, or, because I have so many just dental questions, I'm not ready for this.
Which is reasonable.
Said, reasonable, right? And so there was no reservations about that if there was someone else that kind of helped me along the way. And I made that very clear from the get-go. And so the interview process went on for maybe 2 weeks, and I show up my first day, and I'm sure you can guess what happened.
Here's your patient load. There's no one else there. And if you're in trouble, sorry.
Yeah, you had like a hidden camera in my backpack that day or something. I don't know, but that's exactly what happened. I show up, and they said, well, you're the only doctor. The other doctor decided to quit on Friday, and here you go, and here's your whole patient. I said, this is exactly what I told you I didn't want. And so then I think 3 days later, right before lunch, I had a patient who had a toothache. It was number 13, premolar, upper premolar, had a toothache, decay into the pulp. No problem. Do some endo core crown. Well, again, I told you I don't know what I'm doing.
Okay.
I perf the tooth halfway down because, and so I said, well, you know what? This tooth has to be extracted. But then the office manager said, well, are you sure you can't crown it? And I said, you know what? This is my license. I told you I'm not comfortable doing this kind of stuff. I told the patient they need to get a tooth extracted. I'm not doing endo on a hopeless tooth, and I'm not crowning it. And the office manager just kept going back at me saying, are you sure you can't do this? Do the crown, do the endo. And I said, screw this. And I just left at lunch. So I lasted, I think, 3.5 days. I walked out on my 4th day at lunch, and I said, I'm not coming back. This is some BS. That's horrible.
That takes guts to walk out your first week, essentially, at a practice that you're like, you know what? This is not what you said it was going to be. Screw you guys. I'm out of here.
Well, it was not, this is not what you said it was going to be. I told you exactly what I didn't want and what I wouldn't do. And what the scary part was, I had signed, because I was just out of school, I had moved down to Houston. This was in Houston, Texas.
Okay.
And I'm in Michigan now. So.
Oh wow, I'm a couple hours south of that. I'm by Fort Hood in between Austin and Dallas there.
Sure. So I had gone down there, and I think the day before or 2 days before, I had signed a mortgage or closed on a house. So
do you have any kids at this point? I know you've got a couple now.
No, I had moved down there, and I'm not a big fan of renting or leasing anything. I want to own it. And so they said, well, prove to us that you have a job. We understand you're a dentist coming out of school. No problem. You're going to have some earning potential. And I didn't get a big house or anything, but I had signed on the dotted line literally the day before. And then this happened. I said, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where I was going. So yeah, scary times.
Definitely. Well, and I usually tell people, I know that. So I got my real estate license in dental school, and I love real estate. I love this idea of owning and buying real estate. But I tell people, if you're coming straight out of school and you've got an associateship or an office or something you're buying or building, just hold off a little bit on buying a house. Maybe hold off a year, rent a year, so you get to know the area. You make sure that the job is stable and that you're actually going to stay there, because stuff like that happens and stuff falls through at the last minute. So that's like the kicker on the end of it. So then what did you do? Did you get another job here in Texas or did you head back to Michigan?
Well, first I changed my pants, and then I stayed in Houston for I want to say 1.5 years, 2 years.
Okay.
I really didn't like Houston, but I had a house and made some commitments, and it took me a long time to kind of work through those personal issues. But then right after that job, I had gone on, I don't know, 50 interviews.
Oh wow.
And ended up at a couple different group practices. And it's funny because all these group practices say, how they're different, how they're set themselves apart, and how they're so focused on patient care. And they really sell you. They really sell you on their practices, and they're all the same to me now.
So you did one that was a real corporate chain, and then the next one was kind of a group practice, you're saying?
No, I mean those were all corporate.
Okay.
And then I landed this associateship with a dentist who I really thought I wanted to be that kind of dentist in that kind of practice, and I thought it was going to be great, and it ended up being horrible
Okay.
again. That one, it was a associateship, a true associateship in a single doctor practice, and knowing what I know now, it was actually a very bad practice.
What do you think
It,
their collections were when you came in?
their collections were just over $1 million.
Okay,
But
they-
maybe it was the first year, because I remember going over the numbers and one of the assistants saying, "You know what? They were all excited. The whole team was excited because they said we're finally $1 million practice."
Okay.
Which is great until you hear about all the overhead that was in that practice. I think that dentist had 2 lasers that she didn't use, probably $30,000, $40,000 each. A sapphire bleaching light, which was, decades old.
Right.
That she had like extra Schick sensors that were never used, an entire supply room, like probably 200 square foot supply room. I think it was 8 or 10 operatories with a consultation room, 2 private doctor offices.
So wait,
it was the whole.
Did she have an associate before you, or were you like the
No.
first associate that she'd brought in?
I was the first one.
Holy cow, that's a big practice to just be floating around by herself before bringing you in.
Yeah, and she was in her mid 70s when she brought me
What?
on, and I think she's still practicing today.
Wow.
It's crazy. So she had a really good following. She had very good loyal patients, and her dentistry was very, very good. But she had a propensity to buy a lot of stuff. She had a lot of staff. I think she had 3 front desk, 3 assistants when I came on.
Okay.
So when I tell you, like, oh yeah, it was $1 million practice, she might have been taking home 10% at the end of the day, maybe. It was a huge overhead practice. So I'm glad. I'm glad I didn't buy into that practice, because they paid their CPA as their business manager, and it was the husband who had never worked, and the husband was the quote unquote practice manager, wore the pants in the family. So it was a bad situation.
Well, and how do you even know that? If you're a new graduate, or you've even been out a year or two, it's sometimes you can't know all that information until you get into the practice.
You don't know what you don't know. That's why I try to be real upfront with my associate that I have now. I tell him I'm willing to let you buy into the practice whenever you want. If you want to see the practice numbers, I'll show you what they are. I'll show you what the overhead is. I'll show you how to run the business. I'll show you the dentistry part if you're interested in that, whatever it is. But we just have to have that open communication.
So if you were to do it again, knowing what you know now, which is impossible, but what would you be asking as an interviewing potential associate at an office?
If there's the first thing is, are you interested in buying the practice or being a practice owner or partner? And if so, you need to get that from day one. And that's been said all over the place, but it takes guts to actually do it. Because when you're an associate, you're coming out of school with tons of debt. You need to make some money. So you feel like you have no leverage. You have no leverage in the negotiations or say in your contract.
And
so
even what you should be negotiating or how you would go about that.
Right. And well, I'm getting 35% at another offer at another office, and you're only giving me 32%. So I want 35%. Well, that you're only measuring one thing. How much is the lab bill? What kind of labs do you use? Are you allowed to select your labs? Do they have, in-office milling? What are the lab fees in general? So little things like that. Do I get paid on x-rays is a question that I hate to answer. Because so all those things go into it. You got to take all those things into account. But I think the biggest thing is if you are planning on buying into the practice, or do you want to remain an associate?
Okay.
Because there's a huge change in thinking and your mentality when you're practicing there. If you're going to be an owner, your thinking is going to be a lot different than if you are simply an associate just doing the dentistry.
So let's make it easy. If you're just an associate doing the dentistry, still, what are some questions that you could ask? Some really specifics that you could ask. Ask for their P&Ls or their profit and loss statement and their overhead, or what would you ask for?
Well, if I am, and I don't want to say just an associate,
Sure,
but if you're an associate and you're looking into being there long term, say, yeah, can you tell me what the overhead is for the office? What do you pay? What are the staff salaries as a percentage of the whole?
okay,
What are your gross collections?
okay,
Do you participate with insurance plans? And if so, what's your average write-off as a percentage? So I produce 100,000 a month, but our collections are at 100% and they're $85,000 a month. So your overall write-off is 15%.
okay.
So how much of a haircut are you taking? Do you get paid on collections or production or hourly or day rate?
And what would be any red flags with some of those questions that would make you say, maybe let's look at a different practice?
Anyone who says that their total overhead is 50%. I had a practice who said their overhead was 40%. They're lying. I don't care who it is. They're lying.
Right.
Or they're not taking into account their own salary.
They're not doing the accounting right.
Right. Yeah. You can't get paid more. I was looking at buying a practice. He said, yeah, our total overhead for the practice is 40% or 50%, something like that. I said, well, what's your annual collection? So we're collecting like 2.3 million.
Okay.
So if they're collecting $2 million and their overhead is 40%, this dentist in one office is taking home over $1 million a year.
Yeah, like 1.2 plus million.
Yeah, you're lying. You're so full of it, your eyes are brown. Those are unrealistic numbers. And then, so you say, well, what percentage does the dentist take home? That's a fair question.
Okay.
How much do you get paid for what you do?
Right.
Because then that's going to tell you how much of a control do they have in their overhead? How much are they controlling their lab bills? How much are they controlling their supplies? How much are they controlling the staff salaries? The biggest cost is labor. So how much are they, how much, not so much that they're controlling it, but that they have it under control.
That they know that, A, that they know what it is, and B, that it's not, 40, 50% of their overhead is staff.
Right. And so you start to ask these questions and they're nothing related to dentistry. It's related to owning a business and how well do you run the business, because you're going to be an employee of that business. So if the owner can't answer those simple questions, they don't know what's going on in the business.
Right.
So is that someone that you want to be have a close relationship with? Someone who doesn't know what's going on, but who has all the control and calling the shots, if you will. And so those are a couple good questions.
That's great. Well, and part of this was just to get at the fact that there are things that you can do to weed some of these out and say, oh, okay, this practice can't support me, or maybe I don't want to be working for this person because they don't really know what they're doing. But on the flip side of that is what you were talking about earlier. Until you get in there and actually work and see from the inside, sometimes it's almost impossible to know.
Yeah, it is really difficult. So yeah, it's like, just like anything else, we can't learn by direct observation. We can only learn by indirect observation. So we ask those questions. They don't have to be dead nuts right on. Like they need to know exactly to the percentage, but they need to have an idea of how to get those numbers and what they are. If they're flubbing around and they're making stuff up, well then, that's one answer. If they say, well, I don't know what that is, but it's around this and I can show you these spreadsheets or these numbers, or I can show you the bills. If that's what you're interested in, well, then you're dealing with someone who's on the up and up.
Right. No, absolutely. And
so
even their willingness to talk about that kind of thing and share that kind of thing, if they start getting, hesitant or saying, well, why do you need to know about that? Then that's another red flag right there.
Absolutely. And so those are some good ones. Another good one is how many new patients do you get a month? Because if they're getting 10 new patients a month, as an associate, that should be kind of your patients, I think.
Right.
And an associate is really coming in and is siphoning off of the current practice, right? Like if I work 4 days a week and I bring in an associate 2 days a week, I don't magically have a
6
50%
days worth of patients
I
that
don't, yeah. Just because someone's here doesn't mean the patients are there. So I got to give him half of my patients. I'm taking a 50% pay cut to bring someone on. So I do that. I push my patients into my associate schedule to build him up, to make him successful. But if we have, if we have 10 new patients, let's say we have 10 new patients a week, well, my associate should probably get, at least half of those. And if he's there more, he's going to get more of them. I mean, so it's kind of building up him up. That's kind of the risk reward, the trade off of being an owner.
And are you a fan of, I hear a lot of people doing the $500 a day or 30% or whatever percent of collections or adjusted production.
Yes.
And it seems like that kind of solves the new patient problem, that if the new dentist, the new associate needs new patients, but you're not giving them to them, but you're paying them $500 a day, incentivizes you to give them the patients that they should have, and it incentivizes the associate to actually work and produce.
Yeah, so that's why I don't like a high. I think $500 a day is sort of on the high end because heck, I mean, that's $500 a day for sitting on my butt. That's getting paid a lot. So I actually have a lower base.
Okay,
that's what it should be. It's a base. It's just like minimum wage. Should we raise the minimum wage? No, because it's not designed. Minimum wage isn't designed to support an entire family from someone being a cashier at McDonald's. Like that's not the idea. Base salary isn't. That's not your salary. That's so you don't starve. Okay.
Right.
So get it a base, but then make it a regular collection percentage, and it's either or. But don't worry if you don't have a lot of new patients and you're not seeing. You can't. You're not going to have really good treatment planning skills or case presentation skills right out the gate. Don't worry. You've got that base to save you, and you're going to learn along the way. And it may take 3, 4, 5 months. And now my associate has been with me about 6 months. Now we don't consider the base. He doesn't consider the base at all because, his collections have far outpaced that. So, but it takes you, like you said, you got to be in there for a little bit to actually see the machine at work.
Right. Well, and the other point I wanted to highlight was Jason Wood was talking about the idea that people think ownership is risky and they don't want to be a practice owner because, there's so much risk and there's more debt, more liability. And his counterpoint to that was being an associate for life or for a long period of time is actually more risky. And the risk is not taking that risk of being an owner because you don't have control over your destiny, over your fate. And a lot of times what you think is a good gig ends up not being a good gig. Or even if it is for a little while, then someone gets divorced or something changes and that owner moves on and things change hands and you're not in the same situation you were before. What would you say to someone who says that ownership is risky and I just want to be an associate because that'll be more secure?
I would completely agree with Jason Wood.
That's easy to do. That's what I do.
I mean, I completely agree, but I'm more of a quote unquote risk taker, but they're calculated risks. I mean, I don't take out millions of dollars to build this Taj Mahal practice if I don't have a practice.
Right.
Buying a practice is one of the least risky things you could do.
Okay.
And especially now in this economy. I bought my practice in 2008. The worst time to buy a practice, everyone. It was horrible. And the lease was on 2,000 square feet. I think it was $3,000 a month. I bought a building, totally renovated it, and that mortgage is less than what my lease was. So I have a bigger building with nicer finishes that I own, and I pay myself for less than what a lease would be. Tell me, why would a lease put me in? Why is that more secure?
Right.
Because people are scared that the market is going to quote unquote, downturn and your building isn't going to be worth as much. Doesn't matter. I own it. I can do what I want with it.
Well, and if you're paying less every single month, it becomes an easier decision for you.
Yeah. So, but no, definitely being an associate is the riskiest position you could be in. And heck, I would even go as far to say if you're a partner in a group practice is even riskier than just going off on your own, because I worked in a group practice with about maybe eight to 10 partners. 3 of those partners got kicked out because they didn't have the voting shares or whatever, and they had their shares refunded to them at
Oof.
a discounted rate because of what lawyers said the
Oh.
business was worth. So 3 of those guys thought that they were going to be part of this multi-million-dollar group practice.
Yeah.
But because they didn't buy in as full-fledged partners or control voting, which is all ownership is, they got kicked out, and now they are scrambling to find a practice.
Oh.
And 2 of the 3 actually responded to one of my ads in the local journal, because I use a different email address, so no one knows who it is.
Okay.
But 2 of those guys actually contacted me saying, "Hey, I'm looking for a partnership." And I said, "Well," before I told them who I was, I said, "Well, what's going on in your current situation?" And both of them responded with, "I don't like the way things are heading, so I'm just now I'm trying to protect my nest egg."
Wow.
So yeah, it's some crazy stuff.
No. Okay. Well, so how many years then was it between when you graduated and when you actually moved into practice ownership yourself?
2.5.
2.5. Do you feel like that was enough time for you?
At the time, I did.
Okay. Sure.
That's like, now
Hindsight.
it's like, holy geez, what was I getting into?
Well,
But,
and it's always a plunge at some point, especially because we don't have access to the kind of business training and pathway to show us step by step. Here's ABC, how to be a practice owner, how to acquire practice, and that's something hopefully I'm trying to compile and have for people, and we'll see how far we get and how useful it actually becomes. But the other side of it is just that fear of the unknown, and until you get in there and do it, it's pretty hard. One thing you mentioned was this idea of the procedures that they're doing versus what you do and what you want to do. I've had some conversations with dentists recently that are within 1 to 2 years of having graduated, and they want to expand the scope of their practice. They're working multiple associateships, and they've got a per diem, they've got a percentage, and say they want to learn molar endo, and they're worried that they're slow, and therefore this new procedure isn't productive for them yet in terms of money, and they're struggling to take time off to go learn, and they want to expand the scope of their practice. They're having a hard time doing it, and maybe they just got to jump right in and go for it. But what advice would you give to someone who wanted to widen the scope of their practice? How do they figure out which CE courses to take? How do you do a new procedure when you're slow at it, and eventually, factor that in, balance that out with being profitable? What advice do you have for someone like that? But first, a word from our sponsor, Q Optics. I've got with us here Brent Downs, who is the director of sales at Q Optics, and he's got a little bit of advice for that new dentist going to their first conference.
We'll call her the light bulb lady. This goes back to the early 90s. I was in a booth right next to her, and this lady was legendary in how she would attract people into her booth.
Okay.
And, the unsuspecting dentist within a matter of just a few seconds would have his bags on the ground and 2 light bulbs in his hands.
And we're talking like color-corrected ceiling lights or something?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And she was just a master at communicating, but she was also one of the most pesky sales reps that I've ever met in my life. It got to the point where she was around for years. People would see her walking down the aisle, and they would literally turn around to avoid her. And it made for just a miserable experience for me.
Working next to her.
Exactly. I didn't have a whole lot of people to talk to that week. And the point is, the lesson that I learned from that is just, don't be afraid to say no. You're not going to hurt any feelings. It's just business, and they've got a job to do. Maybe they're a little bit aggressive in how they go about it, but
Sure.
you have to protect your self-interest. So no is a good thing to say.
It's a good little word to learn, and you're never going to hurt anyone's feelings just by learning a little bit and moving on.
Exactly.
Awesome. If you're ready to upgrade your magnification experience, send an email to sales@qoptics.com using the promo code SP16 for $100 off a pair of loupes or $300 off a loupe and light combo. They will figure out who the rep in your area is and schedule a demo for you where you can get fitted, try them out, see for yourselves. Worst case scenario, you say no. Not a big deal. Q Optics. Have a better look.
Well, first off, I would say if you want to do molar endo, then just go to residency, because the first thing I look at is, can my patients benefit from this? Is this a procedure that I'm actually going to do in my practice?
Okay.
So if you got an associate who, or someone just coming out of school, so I don't want to use associate as a derogatory term, but if you're coming right out of school and you say, well, I want to learn more endo, well, how much endo could you do in your current practice? Or how much endo are you referring out? Or how much endo do you feel uncomfortable with that's coming through the practice that you could have captured?
Okay.
And if that number is, I could do 10 molar endos a month, but I'm referring them all out. Okay, then fine. Maybe go do some CE. But if you're not ever doing the procedure, well, then at that point, it's like more of a hobby than it is an investment in your skills. Or building the practice up.
That's awesome. That's a great first step. And I think a lot of people don't think about that is whatever situation you're in, look at what's walking out the door that I want to do that we could be doing, and then capitalize on that opportunity by educating yourself and doing that procedure in-house potentially for a little while and seeing if you can build that up. There's a book called So Good They Can't Ignore You by Cal Newport. And he talks about how most people think like, oh, I want this ideal career and I want to be, one of these guys who has the 4-hour work week. And he said, you don't get there by just putting up your vision and then that's what you do. He said, you get there by being in a situation, looking at what opportunities are available, and then becoming really good at something that is an immediate step forward from what you're doing right now. And so see what's around you, see what you could be doing and what you can learn in your current situation, and maximize that current opportunity, which will lead to other opportunities. And maybe that'll get to the procedures. Say you want to be doing implants, but it's hard to be doing implants if you don't know if you're going to be there in 6 months to restore that implant. So maybe you're doing extractions, simple extractions and things like that, and dentures because you eventually want to be doing implant supported dentures.
Well, yeah. So like endo and composite, do class 2 composite, CE and stuff. I look at those as like, the Twinkies and the ho-hos of my CE, because it's stuff that you enjoy, but is it really profitable to your practice? Maybe not. And even some comprehensive courses that are or continuum that are insanely expensive.
You're talking about like maybe like Spear or Coys.
I won't throw out any names, but yeah.
but I look at those. For me right now, I know that I'm not ready to be doing full mouth dentistry.
Right. And so those are very, very expensive. How relevant are they to your practice? Maybe they are. Maybe you got patients, maybe you're in an area that you can do that. But for me, when I bought my first practice in 2009, it was the doc was doing some ortho. I hate ortho, but I bought that practice because it fit all of my criteria. And so I said to myself, well, I guess I'm going to have to take some ortho classes because these are the patients that I bought.
Right.
So I took a course. The probably the best ortho course for GPs happens to be about 5 miles from my house.
Oh wow!
So it was great. So I did that, and I think he does the course 4 times a year, maybe.
What's the name of the course?
It's Richard Litt, Force, FORCE.
Okay.
Richard Litt, LITT. He does a great ortho course, and I think it's over 2 weekends.
Huh.
And it is jam packed, intense. I mean, you leave at lunch and you're tired, your brain hurts.
Right.
So I took that immediately, and that's not a cheap course either. I think at the time it was about $8,000.
Right.
I said, man, this is $8,000 I do not have. However, I need to invest in myself in the practice because that's what the patients need. So I do that. And then,
did that lead to you end up doing more ortho in your practice or limited cases or where has that gone for you?
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, yes, it has led to more ortho.
Unfortunately, yes.
So it's like, well, now I know how to do it, and I'm not gonna look. If someone's gonna say, "Can I give you $5,000?" I'm not going to say no. Let's just put it that way.
Right.
So I don't like doing it. I try to have a little bit more fun now with it. But I really wanted to
cherry pick the cases you want.
Yeah, I really like surgery, so I knew I wanted to get into implants, and I thought, in my being naive, I thought, well, my patients are going to need to be sedated for this. This is a big surgical procedure. I need to go get IV certified.
Oh, wow.
So I got, I had to get my New York state dental license, and then I took a IV sedation course. It was the only one that you could really go through all in one instead of having it take a whole year.
Right.
And so I did all that, get IV certified. Then I go on these implant courses. And then you start placing implants, and it's like, man, I don't need to be IV certified for this. It's all local, and it's all, it's really not that big a deal. So, that's one thing you can skip is if you want to place implants, don't get IV certified. That'll save that. I just saved your listeners $20,000.
Well, and it's for some states, like I looked at Indiana, which is potentially where I'm going to open a practice after I get out of the Army, and the certification, they require you to have done, I think, a 1-year residency. And then I started looking into the 1-year residencies for IV sedation now, and the ADA is pushing them all to be a 3-year residency because I think they want to create a specialty out of dental IV sedation or something to that effect. They're trying to self-regulate so that we don't get shut down from malpractice and things that happen. But so I realized like, oh, I might have missed the boat on that, but I'm also realizing, you know what, I'm kind of okay not doing that.
You're okay with it. But if that's the kind of practice that you're going into, and that's what they push, we cater to cowards, IV sedation, and they're pushing Versed all day long. Well, then you might need to do that.
Right.
So, it's a cost benefit analysis, I guess.
Well, and check your state and make sure that you can get the training and the certification that you need, and maybe they got grandfathered in with what their training they had 5-10 years ago.
Right.
And that might not work for you anymore.
Yeah.
Well, would there be any other advice that you'd have for someone to evaluate potential CE courses and say, this is going to be a waste of my money versus this is going to be, the best 2 weekends of ortho I'm ever going to get?
Well, I think you just got to look at it objectively. Is this a procedure that I can add? And if I add it, how much revenue am I potentially going to make from that? So like when I wanted to add implants, okay, how much does the course cost? How many implant patients do I already have? A good idea is treatment plan your patients before you can do the procedure.
Huh. That's a great idea.
Treatment plan them. So then you can just run a report and say, how many patients do I have treatment plan for implants?
That's awesome.
Treatment plan them, but don't offer it to the patient. Maybe just treatment plan it.
Right.
And then run your treatment plan report and say, okay, I've got 10 patients. I've got 10 potential implant patients. And if I charge $1,000 for implant, say it's an educational discount, you're going to charge $1,500, but because it's the first one, I'll give you $500 off.
Right.
Or the first 5, you do them for free, whatever.
Right.
But then you've got your patients, No,
and if you don't have that lined up front, and then you go take the course, and then you come back and realize, oh, I don't really have anyone that I could do that on, and then you've spent the money and take the time off, and then that skill and that new knowledge, if you don't put it to use immediately, it kind of decays over time.
Yeah, absolutely. So you got to use it, but then you also have to know how to market that. You also have to know how to put that on the community. Hey, this is what we offer. Come to me for implants. So there's a whole lot that goes into just bringing in a procedure. How are you going to market that procedure? How are your systems in the office to effectively deliver that treatment? Do you know the order? Do you know the lab that you're going to use to fabricate your whatever prosthesis it is? Do you know the prescription of the brackets? Do you know all the types of wires? Do you know the appointment sequence and treatment planning, all that stuff? It can be a headache to bring something new in. And it can be very costly.
Well, and one of the things with that is sometimes you don't realize how important those systems are until you've learned the procedure and tried to implement it. And then it drives the value up in your mind of, oh, I need to figure out how to actually implement this and systematize this and have a set way that we do it. And it's not until you've gone and spent the money and gotten excited about the procedure and maybe done a few, but then realized, okay, I need to tighten this up if this is going to be something we're doing on a routine basis.
Yeah, and so that also, and this is something I never do, but I really need to, is bring your staff to your CE. Bring your assistant. If someone's going to be working with you, bring them to the course, because it's going to be longer and harder and less effective if you train your staff, because they're getting it all third hand. It's like the telephone game, right?
Well, and their buy-in, their excitement level is never going to be the same as if you're telling them after. It's like me trying to convince my spouse of something versus her hearing it from a friend. And the friend is always the more legitimate source than me. And same thing with staff. If they're hearing it firsthand from the lecture, they understand it. They're on the same page. It makes a huge difference, I can imagine.
Yeah. So even for the procedural, the clinical, the technical CE, get at least one staff there. And I've burned myself many times doing that. So I think just talking through it, I think when I go in the future, plan my CE, I need to get with my assistant and say, look, we need to go on this together. So someone else can hold my hand through it, because I can't get it all.
So I've heard you talking, I think, on Mark Costas's podcast about some interesting ways that you've reached out to people to try and find practices to buy, because you're right now in the market to expand and grow, get to, I think at one point you were saying 8 practices.
Yes. Yeah. Everyone do every podcast so Mark Costas's was the first podcast I ever did on my birthday, and I did Jonathan Van Horn's, I think, that afternoon, but I did Mark Costas's in the morning.
Okay.
Every single podcast I've been on since Mark's has always said, I heard you want to buy 8 practices. I heard you want to have, everyone's stuck on that 8. So I think now I gotta follow through, because I said it. Now I gotta do it.
You have that public commitment. We're holding you to it.
Yeah, exactly.
So you've got that experience of trying to look for and find more practices and evaluate more practices, which is the skill set that I hope to somehow translate to both myself and my audience. What are the traditional ways that people look for a practice to buy, and what are some non-traditional ways that people look for either, and not only practices to buy, but associateships? I feel like there were some people that were lecturing to us at a lunch and learn in dental school, a previous graduate who had said, some of my best opportunities didn't come through listings or traditional methods, and they came from relationships and networking. But what are some of the ways that you've seen yourself and others find opportunities and practices versus just looking for listings?
I think it's just the old adage that the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right?
Okay.
So when I bought my first practice, I was the first one. I was the only one in this dental journal, in the Michigan Dental Association journal, to place an ad actively looking for someone who was selling their practice.
Okay.
I said, I want to buy a practice. Here's my criteria. Do you fit this criteria? If so, give me a call. And that's actually how I bought the practice. The guy saw my ad.
No way.
And he called me, coincidentally, on my birthday in 2008, in March of 2008. He called me on my birthday and said, hey, I saw your ad, and I just got off the plane, and I've decided I'm going to sell my practice, and I just saw your ad. Let's talk. And that ended up being the practice. So I was the first one that did that I know of in the journal. All of them, all the other ads are, this is what's for sale. This is what's for sale. Well, how about you never see a real estate ad saying, hey, we're a couple looking for a house. Are you selling one? No, it's only houses being sold. So try and go against the grain, I think. It's just doing a little bit different. So, advertising in journals is a good way.
Okay.
I haven't done Facebook ads yet. Like, hey, why not take out an ad on Facebook? I'm looking to buy a practice. Are you looking to sell a dental practice? I'm looking to buy one.
Right.
That would be interesting.
I think you mentioned that you had been sending letters. Is that something you're still doing?
I was trying to find a segue to talk about more, to get into that. But the way that I found an associate, my current associate is the best one that I've had so far. I found him because I asked my supply rep. I said, "Hey, you're in a lot of offices and you're in some group practices with a bunch of associates who I know are unhappy with their group practice. If you know of any who sound like they're competent and they want to get in a good practice and not get taken advantage of, give them my number, give out my cell phone, have them text me." And that's how I found this one. So talk to your supply reps, talk to specialists, because new specialists are networking with new dentists because they want to get those referrals. Right. So they're going to know the dentists who are in those group practices as well, or dentists just coming out who might not be happy with their associate and with their associateship. So talk to specialists. The I found that's been really effective is sending out a letter to dentists who might be around retirement age. And the way that you find out how old a dentist is you go, I think every state has it, where it's you can verify a dental license.
Okay.
And how old were you when you graduated? I graduated in 2006, so I was 26.
I was last year, so I was 28.
Okay. So there's a 2-year span. Everyone's had those dental students who are in their 40s, but most of us were in our mid-20s.
Mid to late 20s, yeah.
Mid to late 20s, right? So if you're looking for a dentist who is, let's say they're still practicing and they're 65, some dentists, if they're ready to retire at 50, you probably don't want that practice because they've managed it well and it's going to be expensive. Okay. You want an old dentist who's been practicing a long time because they, probably don't have the energy to grow their practice anymore, so they're flatlining. So you're going to get it at a better price.
Okay.
B, they're not actively marketing their practice, so you're going to get it at a much lower price. And C, they're still doing old dentistry, like old giant amalgams, which gives you an opportunity to do more expensive, long-lasting dentistry, comprehensive dentistry. And what was that, C or D? They probably don't have enough money saved up to retire, so they still want to practice. So you've got a built-in associate who's going to sell you their practice cheap, and there's a lot of dentistry to do.
And that's perfect
got cash flow
for you, oh my gosh, because you're looking for a built-in package of not only a practice, but an associate to go with it.
Yeah, it's like the holy grail of practices.
Right.
So why why do bank robbers rob banks?
Well, that's where the money is.
That's where the money is. So let's send these letters to where the money practices are that you want. Those are older dentists in their like mid 60s, maybe they're 65. So if they're 65 and they graduated dental school when they were 25, we're looking for dentists who graduated 40 years ago. So their dental license should say issued in 76?
Right.
1976. So I'm verifying dental licenses who have been issued 1974 to 1980.
Well, and some of them, I don't know how each state does it. I've heard that some states have like letters or numbers that kind of group them by years, and so you can kind of look at the whole database and say from here to here, that's probably the people who were getting their licenses, between 1970 and 1980. Is that kind of what you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I look at an area that I want to practice or that I want to buy a practice in, and then I just Google search what dentist in that area, and then I just have a spreadsheet of a list of dentist names.
Okay.
So I have a list of, let's say, 50 names. Then I go to my Verify a Dental License website, and I put in each name one by one and see what year they graduated. And then I'll put that in my spreadsheet so I know later on, okay, I can't talk to them now, but maybe 5 years from now, whatever.
So you're doing some significant legwork and some investigative dental license Googling to build this database for yourself, because no one's going to have this information lined up like you want it. You're getting out there and thinking of these things and finding out about these different ways of doing it and then doing it yourself.
I'm sure there are dental statistics, demographics firms that you can pay for that, but I find like if I just send them a letter, I give their office a call. Hey, I'm just looking at practices. If you're want to be open to a conversation, I'd love to take you out to lunch. So here's another trick.
Okay.
If you're an associate looking for a practice, I've gotten resumes dropped off. Oh, I just graduated. I want to work in an office. Here's my resume. That has no effect whatsoever. But if an associate came in and said, look, I'm looking for a practice, I'm looking to buy a practice, or I just want to be an associate, but I want to learn dentistry from someone, and I think Dr. Vyver would be a great mentor, I'd love to take him to lunch someday. Could you get me on his calendar so I can take him to lunch? I would go to that lunch immediately. I would set aside time for that to talk to someone, because that's the kind of that we want to help each other out in general. And if someone's making that kind of effort,
taking that kind of initiative.
Yeah. So I've never had that. So that's another way that you could get in with a good practice, is find the practice that you want first. Say, look, if you're open at all, just let me take you to lunch. It doesn't have to be, let's go to McDonald's. Let's just talk about it.
Right.
And cultivate that relationship.
Oh, that's awesome. I think some of the new graduates right now there's these brokers for associates, people looking for a position, and they're plugging them into these group practices or corporate offices. And those can work to get you a job, and you're rolling the dice as to if this is going to work out or not. But if you're looking to find something custom fit for the style of practice, the procedures you want to learn, maybe something that you could buy into, no one cares as much about your career and your life and your potential as a dentist as much as you do. And so doing this legwork and reaching out to people, even though that's might be intimidating to you, is well worth it. And it's awesome to hear some different ways to do that in a friendly, non-threatening sort of way.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that letter I send out to retiring dentists is trying not to be threatening. It's just, hey, I'm looking for a practice. If you want to continue to practice, and you don't have to do anything, you can continue to practice the way you want, and you can do it in a nice building with new technology, and you don't have to pay for it. I'd love to take you out to lunch and discuss the issue, to discuss the opportunity further. And if not, no harm, no foul. I won't send you anything. If you were put off by this, just let me know. Here's my email address.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It's just that's all it is. It's just being human.
And what has been your response, calls versus letters, in terms of, I'm assuming letters isn't really nice because you can send things out and it doesn't take as much time, and you're not cold calling 10, 20, 30 different people, versus calls might take a little more time, but you might get to the person sooner. Have you seen it work out that way, or is it kind of either one works?
I think the letter is actually better.
Okay.
And then you follow it up with a call, because now you've got a reason for your call.
Okay.
Hey, did you get my letter?
Nice.
I've had a couple calls where I just cold call and I say, you know what, I'm looking at practices and I'd like to come in your area. And do you do implants? Because I do that. I could add that to your practice. Do you do ortho? Because I do that. I could add that to your practice. And sometimes my response has been, you know what, I'm not selling my practice. I don't appreciate this. And how did you get my information? How did you know I wanted to retire?
Okay.
Well, dude, you're 67 years old.
Right.
I don't,
It's not rocket science,
Right. So,
okay.
I think people have been burned by brokers in the past, and so
they think people are mistrustful
like
of anyone that approaches them in that way, if it's not done in the right way, because they've been burned in the past, or they just think you're selling something, not trying to offer a solution.
Right. And so that's the key is you're offering a solution, and the letter, a letter says, look, the solution to you transitioning out of practice is you can still practice. You just don't have the overhead, and I'm the guy. I want to do that, and let's talk. So
right.
Having that kind of that's like your, I always think of like I was listening to a history podcast about this guy. He was a scout during the Civil War. So it's like you send the scouts out first. Let's do some reconnaissance first,
right,
before you just send in the front line, send in the cavalry. So
no, absolutely. Well, this has been awesome. I initially was gonna ask you about systemization and some of the online, marketing and systems that you have. And I'd love to talk to you about some of that in the future, because I feel like you're on the cutting edge of not only content marketing, drip marketing, using lead capture and all these different things that I think some dentists just don't even know are an option or that exist. And you're doing all these practices that, modern software and websites and all of these guys are doing versus your traditional dental practice advertising. And the other thing I'd love to talk to you about is systemization, some of the ways you've included training new employees and onboarding people and contacting patients and systemizing and then automating and doing both and taking that to the next level. So I'd love to have you back at some point in the future to talk about either of those things, because you're doing some really cool things. But when I heard some of your experiences with associateships and also that you're actively looking for practices, those are two skills and two experiences that I think kind of serve my generation of new graduates and people that are looking to avoid mistakes and create a plan for their future. So thank you so much for your time and for all your advice and your willingness to talk with us.
Absolutely. Anytime. Yeah, we'll definitely set it up again.
Cool. Hey, thanks.
All right. Have a good one.
You too. That was an awesome interview. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Just a reminder, thank you guys for sharing all those reviews on iTunes. I think my favorite one was by Super Hoop Stud, which is a pretty awesome iTunes name. And he said, "Kidney stones seem to be going around nowadays. Took one of my perio co-residents out of commission a couple of weeks ago as well. Give Merck my condolences. To steal a line from a recent carpool karaoke, he should name the stone The Truth after Gwen Stefani's new album, This Is What the Truth Feels Like." Well, it turns out that Rocco has a brother, and the brother's name is probably going to be The Truth. So more condolences to Merkley as he's found out that he has a second kidney stone, and the saga continues. If you have any other suggestions for a name for the second kidney stone, you can leave an iTunes review. Or I think our new tradition is going to be to leave the most ridiculous thing you've ever heard from a patient's mouth as your iTunes review. So if you get a chance, leave us a review, and we'll talk to you next week on the Shared Practices Podcast.